Welcome aboard, everybody. My name is Doobyis. This is something I call Fly in Formation. It's a spin-off show from my weekly mix show, which is called After the Smoke is Clear, or ATSIC Radio. And on ATSIC, I play independent Canadian artists every week, put together an hour-long mix. Either me or my homie DJ Dice handles the mix duties. And, we try to do our best just to get as much new music in as many new ears as possible. That's always been the mission plan. And then for Fly in Formation, I've started just talking to artists who, represent their scenes and are doing things in each different community across the country. And definitely today joining me is a man who fits that description, Arlo Maverick. You've been on before, man. Thanks for coming back again to talk more. It's been a while, dude. How you doing?
I've been okay. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation. But first and foremost, I definitely want to give you your flowers in the sense of what you're doing, because I think that with podcasts like this, any opportunity we have to document our stories as Canadian hip hop artists is so important, and I don't think there's enough of it. So thank you for doing that, interviewing like multiple people, and like I'll catch clips online. I'll see like full interviews where I'm just like learning so much about artists. And I love how there are key questions that you'll ask and then find ways to clip those together to get different perspectives, because everyone's experiencing Canadian hip hop in a different way. So yeah, it's dope.
That's one of the most fun things about especially the like how important series of questions that I ask everybody. How important is this? How important is that? Is just like none of those have a right answer, right? It's all just opinion based, and so I just figured like what better way to kind of figure out what the best course of action is than to ask a bunch of people who are out there doing it themselves.
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of fun, and I've learned a lot, and I feel lucky and blessed to be in this position where I get to talk to all these different artists, because artists are some of my favorite people, man. Like it always goes well just talking to artists about art. So
100%. And I think that something that I've learned over the years, just through either reading books that have been written by journalists or being a journalist myself, working within radio, within print, and so on and so forth, is that you get to go to school every single day and learn something fascinating new about the world just through asking questions of people who are willing to share their life experiences. So I imagine you probably are a wealth of knowledge and continue to be one,
I do my best. I'm trying to build up that wealth of knowledge day by day or whatever. But yeah, man, I mean, I don't think there's anybody paying more attention week by week to the Canadian hip hop scene. I definitely am spending a lot of time just obsessing over independent artists across the country, and I'm having fun doing it. So I'm happy to be here doing it. And today, you don't have new music that we're talking about. Your newest album, Blue Collar, is dope, and people should definitely still check that out or whatever. But we already talked about that right after it had come out, so. We don't need to touch too much on that. I know you just were recently overseas doing like a showcase, right?
Yeah. So 2024, I did a few different showcases. Was out in Singapore for Music Matters, was in Rotterdam for New School Rules. Then back in Canada as well, too, just traveling all over the place. So yeah, trying to get the music out there. And the best way to do that, despite the fact that people think it is online, is definitely in person, because you can build those one-on-one relationships in real time. So yeah,
for real. Yeah, I mean, having the Zoom calls is like almost there, like it's almost like actually being in person. But no, it's better if you actually get to shake hands and really build with people, I think.
100%.
Yeah. Had you been out to Singapore before? Like, was that new ground broke, or?
That was new ground broke. I've been out to South Korea. That was my first time being in Asia back in 2017 when we showcased out there. But Singapore is an entirely different beast. One thing that's great about Singapore is that they are, one of my friends, Major One, who's a Canadian hip hop legend, she explained it to us as Singapore is Asia for dummies, So if you are a person who cannot speak any of the languages, go to Singapore first. It is more expensive, but at the same time, though, everyone speaks English. And so the barriers that we had as far as communication as it related to South Korea, we did not have there. Although the first night in South Korea, I got lost, and the person who helped me find my way just happened to be a Korean hip hop MC. So that was hella cool.
Nah, hip hop has your back no matter where you go, I guess.
100%.
So, what was the scene like in Singapore then? Like, was there a lot of love for, um, I don't know, I guess North American hip hop, or was it kind of its own hip
Yeah,
hop scene out there, or what type of stuff are they
they
listening to?
they've got their own hip hop scene out there, but they also seem to be receptive towards what we're doing out here. Like the great thing about Music Matters is that the way the festival is set up is that they put a lot of promo into the artists, and you do roughly 2 to 3 showcases just in different venues. But they also have what is the main stage in Kikwe, which is like this huge, like consider Churchill Square, but like with a roof over it so you can't get rained on. And then you have department stores all over the place with restaurants, so on and so forth. And the place is packed with people who are
Nice.
just there to see music being performed. It is such a crazy experience.
So how many performances did you actually do? Was it like just kind of a 1 day thing, or how?
No, no, we were there for roughly about 6 days, and we did 3 showcases. So 2 club nights, and then we did the main stage, which is pretty much out in front of everybody. And then Sunny Grimes, my DJ and longtime best friend, he also had an opportunity to spin at a YouTube party. So it was,
Nice.
yeah, we made the most of the trip, you know.
So, and people were digging it, but everybody showed love.
Yeah, I put footage up on online of just like the crowds just like feeling the music, and it was cool because it's one of those things where like you never know what to expect, right? You're going into a market where some people might be familiar with the music, and but majority of people aren't. But they were receptive to us and so many of the artists that went up there, and we were the only. Yeah, there was us and another hip hop act that was from Singapore, but they didn't have a lot of hip hop. It was quite diverse. A lot of Asian acts that were there, but we were, yeah, if I'm not mistaken, we were the only like hip hop act. And my style, as you know, like leans into traditional hip hop, but at the same time though deals with contemporary hip hop. So when we brought out the boom bap, like the crowd felt it, which is really dope, which is just like, okay, like there's some heads out here, you know. So
Nice, nice. Is it similar to like Europe, where that's kind of the vibe, is like that traditional boom bap kind of is like surging right now?
it's weird because like depends on who you talk to, because some of the people that we talk
Sure.
to out there, that it's like, yeah, like boom bap is still alive. You talk to some people that are like, no, trap is like the thing. One of the guys who is one of the key like organizers for the event, Matty J, who's like been involved with hip hop for a number of years. He's a singer as well too. He's more of like a hip hop head, so he loved us, and that's one of the reasons why he selected us to showcase. And so there is a demand for it. There's an audience for it, but it's one of those things where it all depends on what you're exposed to, I think, more readily, I guess, you know.
Sure. So you shouted out Matty J and Meja One. I'm familiar with
Yes.
Meja One. Are they friends of yours? Like, was that kind of the link up of how you landed over there, or how did you
No.
line that up in the first place, man?
Well, here's the thing, and I'm not sure if you've done an interview with Dio yet, but Dio Gibson, who's just a legend as it relates to Canadian hip hop and a pioneer in so many different ways, he has been the guy to go to as far as getting overseas, because he's like built all these relationships over the years. And so, my first time performing over in Europe was back in 2017 for a third party showcase that he hooked me up with for Midem. And at that time, he introduced me to some people from Music Matters. He's like, yeah, you need to get over into Asia. And unfortunately, it took a little bit longer than expected. But at the same time, though, like the seeds that he planted and just connecting me with different people kind of helped that along. But I submitted an application, much like everyone else does. And they went through the application, which is really cool still, because the people who are going through the application are people who are trying to curate the best showcase possible, and ensure that like you're right for that market to help break you into that. And so Maddie ended up going through the application, actually hit me up and like was asking questions, and yeah, like I'm like, does he like the music? Does he not like the music? And then once he selected us for it, it's just like, okay, cool. The only thing though is that Singapore is very different in the sense that it's a very strict country, and some of us will remember the caning that took place back in like the 90s of the American boy who went over there. So for
Oh,
them,
damn.
it's
Okay.
a country where very conservative, and respect is a big thing, and that's one thing that I loved about there is that it was people talk about it being clean, but one thing that I like is the whole fact that the people out there respect themselves and they respect you. They're not going to steal from you. They're not going to be. They're very hospitable, but not to the point that they treat you like you're a god, but treat you like you're their family. So
Right.
that's one thing
Yeah.
that I really appreciated about being out there.
Nice, man. Did you have to like censor yourself at all as far as
Yeah.
any of your performance goes or whatever? Like most of your stuff isn't really like fuck this guy,
Yeah.
fuck that guy or
No,
whatever. But yeah,
no, and that's the thing. I don't really curse much in my music, but there was the request that we not say anything political or anything like that.
okay,
Apparently, a few years ago, somebody had went up on stage and made a political statement, and for them, the thing. It's a festival, so they don't want that to be there.
sure.
And yeah, I was trying to get kicked off stage, so like I stayed on stage. Here's the funny thing is that I get told right before we go up on stage, you have to stay on stage. You can't step on the speakers. You can't step off stage. So I'm just like, oh man. So I'm working the stage, but typically with me, like I'm out there connecting with the audience. And then,
Right.
but I did not want to get in trouble. Didn't want them to shut down our set. Literally the night after, I'm seeing people like go off and like connect with the audience. I'm just like, yo, like, but it is what it is.
It
It is
wasn't
what it
that
is, you know?
strict, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, but I
Better to
wasn't trying
follow
to
the
take the
rules.
chance.
Yeah, yeah. When you're in foreign countries, better to follow the rules for sure, man.
Yeah,
Um, so dude, this is the 94th interview that I've done with different artists so
wow.
far. And a lot of them have told me like, oh yeah, get at me, I'll help you try to find grants. Like
Yeah,
I get grants all the time, I can help you out. And then there's guys like Trips, who's in chat right now, who when I asked him about like how important are grants, he's like, anybody who's not getting grants is an idiot, man, they're stupid. And I was like,
shouts
all
out the
right,
trips.
all right, I hear you, I hear you. But I've gotten similar answers to that from so many different people saying like, if we're in a country that gives artists money, you might as well
Yes.
sign the paperwork and get in line and get some of that money or whatever. And I wholeheartedly agree. It just I don't know, man. I have uh some type of paralysis that has just stopped me from ever actually doing it. I'll go and I'll look at the grant application forms and whatnot online, and like
Yeah.
I've made the accounts and stuff. I haven't actually went through with it because I always kind of just I end up doubting like this one isn't really right for what I'm trying to ask for. Like,
Mm.
can I get a grant for what I need to do? So I appreciate you coming on today to answer questions about this whole grant process, and I really
Yeah.
appreciate you just giving me the time to bounce some of these ideas off of somebody who knows some of the answers to questions I might have or whatever. I've went to the grant writing seminars and the mock juries and stuff. Like I know you were involved in some mock jury
Yeah.
grant whatever seminars up in Edmonton, and I was hoping to see you when I went to the one here in Lethbridge or whatever. But it definitely got some information from it, but at the same time, I kind of walked away. Uh, yeah, struggling to find the hope, I guess, or whatever, right? It, because they here in Lethbridge, they reviewed an application that had been denied for a local band. They didn't, tell us who the local band was or whatever,
I
but they
was.
went
Yeah.
through the application, and there were just a few things in there that, like, just struck me the wrong way. Where I was like, "Oh, that's not what I wanted to hear," or whatever. But I, so I wanted to ask you, man. Like, I've been I've had this kind of brainchild for the entire time I've been doing After the Smoke is Clear and Fly in Formation, that
Yeah.
I want to put together some sort of collaborative album with all the artists. I mean, and obviously not all the artists because there's hundreds of them, but with select artists who I've played on AtSick. And I'm not even
Yeah.
talking about like me rapping on this album. I
Yeah.
want to
You want to
mash
be a
up,
curator?
yeah, I want to curate it. I want to
Yeah.
get this guy working with that guy because they've never worked before, and buy the beat from someone Canadian too. Like, and really
Yeah.
just do the full on like national Canada scene album. And
Okay.
it's happened before. I'm not pretending that it'll be the first or anything, but I love that type of project where it brings all those different heads together. And so, one thing that kind of like, is that something I'm going to have to look for federal funding for? Because a provincial level grant, I feel like, wants to help their province's artists, right? Um,
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so just to, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, that's about where that's a good place to for me to stop ranting. Is
So
like, should I be looking at federal or provincial or, I mean, local, municipal? Like, is there a chance that municipal or provincial would fund something like that, or is it too wide of a scope?
no, I don't think it's too out of the scope at all. If you are the project lead and you are going to be the person who is coordinating everything, finding the artist, curating it, possibly coming up with the concepts, the direction, so on and so forth, then you could apply for that in the sense of you being a artist from Lethbridge or being an artist from Alberta or being a Canadian artist, right? So I think you would have the best chance of success at a federal level because of the fact that you're so Canada Council, which would be most likely be the grant that you want to apply for, that would probably be the best route because you could get, depending on what your budget is, you can get up to $60,000, right? And that 60,000 could now cover recording costs, possibly if you need to fly people in, production costs, possible musicians, whatever the case may be,
Right.
paying the artists. So the first thing that I would do is look at what are going to be the costs associated with this, right? And then figure out how you're going to be able to justify why you need to pay those costs, right? So from a municipal standpoint, they may look at it from the standpoint of, okay, well, how does this help grow our art scene here, right? And that's a valid question to ask. But one of the ways that you could answer that is that you, as someone who is from that scene, I imagine you'd be working with some artists from there. That would be enough to at least have it be a part of the conversation, right?
Okay.
We are always acting as ambassadors for the scenes that we are part of, right? So that in itself would allow you to apply for that funding. Like back in, this is like years ago, I put together a grant for a project called Jale, right? And it was for a crew that we assembled called Mahogany Public. And it was essentially a super group of different Black artists from the province talking about the Black experience, right? And we were able to get funding to do that. And Politic Live wasn't the main artist for it. We essentially brought in artists that we were able to pay for studio time and so on and so forth. And we put this album out and got the funding for it. So I don't think what you're saying is impossible. I think it's a matter of having a conversation with the consultant for your municipal grant organization and your provincial one, and then saying, okay, well, what costs would you guys be willing to cover? Because it might be a situation of them saying, okay, well, we're willing to fund these specific things within the grant. And then once you get that explained to you in your grant, put that in there. So then when the jury sees it, because it's not the grant body organization that makes the decisions on the actual application, it's the individual jurors, right? And one of the ways that you can get ahead of that is, again, talking with the consultants from there, explaining to them what your idea is and saying, okay, well, these are the costs that we want to have associated with this, with the municipal grant. These are the ones we want to have associated with the provincial grant. This is what we want to have associated with the federal grant, right? And then you basically just allow that to be included in your budget notes. So then that way, each one of the organizations could then say, okay, cool, we're cool with funding this component because it meets our mandate. And then the next organization could say, we're cool with funding this because it meets our mandate, right? And in you getting ahead, as I said, what ends up happening is that when those applications are assessed by the jury of your peers, the consultant from there can then communicate to them that we've already had this conversation with the applicant about him using the expenses or the money for this allocated portion of the grant, you know? So then that way it's not a surprise when everyone's just like, well, is it? Because here's the thing. The consultants that will be supervising the grants, they can't make any decisions or say any statements that are going to sway the opinions of the jurors on whether or not they should fund it, but they can provide information in regards to this is what was communicated to us, and then let the jury make the decision. Your biggest challenge is going to be convincing the jury why they need to fund this, right? And one of the things that is often said when it comes to applications is that would you fund this yourself, right? And so a lot of times you have to like answer every possible question. Like for me, every time I write a grant, I provide as much detail as possible. Alison Kwan or Alison Pfeiffer, she was someone who became my grant guru, right? Like she would, I'd get her to review every one of my applications. This is something that a lot of people don't take advantage of, is like reaching out to the consultants ahead of time and saying, hey, do you mind looking at my application? Alison Pfeiffer would do that for me all the time. And because she was such a stickler for detail, I became so good at providing information, but also providing budget notes or appendix that would allow any questions that would be asked to be there to be the answer for that. You know, you want to make it as clear as day. And sometimes the best way to do that is not only just getting a consultant to look at it, but getting a friend who is not a grant writer, who is not involved with music, to look at it, and they'll ask questions that you may have never thought of, because the jury might be someone who's from your genre, they might not be. The jury might be someone who is from your discipline, they might not be, right? It could be a visual artist who's reviewing it, or it could be someone who is a school teacher who doesn't create music, but she's involved with music. I hope this is all making sense.
Yeah, I think it is. So the seminar that I went to here, it was Jinting and a U of L professor who were doing it. So definitely, you know, they both said they'd sat on a bunch of panels in the past and judged a lot of different grants or whatever. And, you know, so I'm aware that they might be from outside of the hip hop world or whatever. I guess the so would I be better off, like, should I be reaching out to artists who I want to work with potentially before I've secured funding to make sure that they're on board to do this thing if I can give them X amount of dollars? Okay. And then write the application saying, and this guy said he'd do it for $400 or whatever. This guy said he'd do it for this much.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
100%. And one of the things that's crucial is getting letters of confirmation. A lot of people want to get letters of support, which is good. Don't get me wrong. Like, getting a letter of support is important. But Alan Gray Eyes from Winnipeg years ago had told me this in regards to a video fan grant that we were applying for as Politic Live, and he said that letters of support often don't carry as much weight unless the person themselves carries that weight, right? Because if you can get a letter of support from someone who has that name and has that reputation, then it means something to the jury, because it's just like, well, this person here is putting their neck on the line for this project. However, a letter of confirmation goes further than that, because that allows the jury to know that you have confirmation that you are reaching out to get for Socrates to be on your project. That letter saying that I, Socrates, Canadian hip hop artist, blah blah blah, am writing this letter to confirm that I will be an artist who's featured on this project. That goes a long way, because now the jury can see that, okay, well, you're not just talking about the project, you've had these conversations, and there is support from this artist to be part of it, right? So those go a long way, and a lot of times people overlook that because they're just like, yeah, I'm going to write this application and send it in. But if you've listed that you're working with this producer, you listed that you're working at the studio, or you have this musician coming aboard, and you haven't had those conversations, or you've had those conversations but it's not concrete, the jury may or may not for them, they want to make sure everything is clear. They want to make sure that the moment that they say, okay, cool, we are approving this grant, you can start the next day, the moment you get the funding, because you've already crossed all your T's and dotted all your I's.
Right. Okay. So another thing that I've heard is, like, recently up in Edmonton, there was the Edmonton Art Council was doing a grant that was, they wanted everything to be centered around exploration. There was like a theme of, like, exploration is going to be what you need to explain how your project is going to help with exploration of something. Like, is that a usual thing? Like, will all of the grant levels always have some theme like that you've got to figure out how to relate to? Or Um, because
Okay,
I mean, for
so
something like
typically
this, I could probably be like, sorry, but I could probably be like, okay, well, I'm going to help people explore the national scene or whatever, and kind of elaborate on that
yeah.
concept a little bit, and I could make that make sense. But if various different themes arose, it might be more or less difficult to do that. Is that always a thing?
Okay, it is a thing, and the reason why it is a thing is that the granting bodies have specific grants that they typically have, right? So the ESC has its equity and access grant that is typically in the fall. Then it has another two grants that they offer in February and in June. Those are kind of staples that they'll have throughout the year, right? But then they'll also have things that come up from time to time where it's just like they've received funding from from their granting body saying, hey, because someone's put an idea where they're just like, hey, we want to create more murals around the city, or we want to see more artists being able to go abroad and explore and create, or whatever the case may be. So those special types of grants will come from time to time. Like even when we had this would have been around the time of the centennial, like we had grants that were specific to that. So there'll always be the grants that are more specific towards projects. So recording a project. And this is for all different disciplines, right? So if you want to put on a play, like a lot of the plays that we see in Fringe are ones that people have applied for an individual project through the EAC or Alberta Foundation for the Arts, right? But there will be those times where there are ones that are specific towards a theme, as you said, and so you would apply to that. There was an event that we held here in Edmonton back in September, which was part of a grant that the EAC had in regards to cultural exchanges. So finding ways to bring communities in Edmonton together to share and promote Edmonton history, so on and so forth, right? And so with that grant, John Armstrong was able to create an event that centered around telling the histories of different music in Edmonton. So that grant there was specific to that. And if he wanted to use that grant to apply for an album, to record it or market it, he wouldn't be able to, but there'd be another grant that'd be available for that, right? So a lot of times these side missions, I guess you could say, they
Sure.
become ways for us to celebrate and promote culture in ways that aren't typical, in the sense of it being a project where you're doing a play, or you're doing a painting, or you're doing a mural, or you're doing an album, or you're doing a dance recital, whatever the case may be.
Okay. So
I hope that makes
stuff,
sense.
yeah, stuff like an album that normally happens won't necessarily be as thematically based as some of these offshoot grants might be then a little bit, eh?
Yeah, and there's ways that you can do that, because again, like when we applied for the grant for Jale, like that was something that was specific to whatever the grant was at that time, right? So and that was a musical album. So here's another example. Okay, so there's an organization called the Edmonton Heritage Council, and what they do is that they offer grants to people who want to find ways to document Edmonton history, right? So we recently did a documentary about West Indian cricket here in Edmonton, and so we did a film. But that's not to say that you can't use that same grant to do a book or do an album. Let's say you wanted to do something that would actually record stories of, or record songs. Like Kaz has spoken about, like finding ways to like revive some of the 2000s hip hop music, because like that was such a crucial time period for Edmonton hip hop. And he could probably come up with a compilation where it's like, okay, we're going to find ways to get this music out to the audiences out now who wasn't around you at that time period, possibly go and like have songs remixed, remastered, and put it out. So that in itself could be utilized for that. So a lot of times you just have to, the great thing about a lot of these consultants is that if you go in and talk with them, they'll tell you the broad scope of what you can do. And as long as you can justify it, then you can get the grant.
So is it recommendable to go like talk to the Lethbridge Council of Arts or whatever before I even start trying to write a grant? Like just sit down with
Yeah,
somebody
yeah.
and get a little coaching before I even begin in this?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
I would say have an idea, or have some ideas in mind, and then go and talk with them. And if you get a great consultant, like my consultant at Canada Council, like one day she basically spent like a whole hour just telling me about all these grants that I could apply for because she's aware of what I do. And I was just like, this is crazy. Like, I didn't even know about this. So she's letting me know about these various opportunities. So, and now it's a matter of me figure out, okay, what project can I attach to that? And do I have the capacity and the time to do so? Right. So I had ideas, but when she began to talk, I began to see that there was more possibilities, you know?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and again, I think that comes down to that whole face to face building relationships goes a little bit better than just,
100%.
yeah, if they're picking up an application and seeing your name for the first time or whatever, yeah, that might be a different thing. Um, One thing that, so
And
every, yeah, go ahead. Go.
no, I was going to say that one thing that we have to keep in mind is that the panel that actually assesses your application is a jury of your peers, right? So the more active you are in your community, the better the chances are that someone is going to fight for you when your application comes across. And you may have communicated something in a way that is not necessarily making sense to the other jurors. But if you have someone on that panel who's just like, no, like I know Doobyis, I'm familiar with his work. He's got a podcast. He does a radio show. This guy's a community builder. We should fund this project. That will go a long way, right? But if you are someone who is never communicates, never interacts with your community, and people come across an application just like, well, it sounds good, but we don't necessarily understand the idea, you won't have someone being an advocate for you in that session. And it could be anybody. And the thing about it too is that like it's not a matter of whether the person knows you and is your best friend or anything like that, because obviously there's conflicts of interest that have to be factored into it. But it's a matter of that person being aware of who you are within the community. And the generation that we come from, it was very much about going to shows and meeting people, so on and so forth. And in the day and age that we're in right now, people can create communities online, but creating a community within your city is extremely important. And this is where I've been on juries before where we're provided links, we're provided all this stuff here. And if I want to go down the rabbit hole because I really like your stuff, then make me a fan, right? And what I mean by that is that like, every artist has to find a way to make sure that they are finding a way to shape the narrative in the way that they want to do that, right? So whether it's how you're telling your story through Instagram, right, through your posts, whether it's a matter of how you're telling your story through a playlist that you may have on your Spotify page that's like, hey, I have this thing called quick picks or something like that for Arlo. I used to call it Allow Me to Introduce, right? But it's like, if I want people to if they're coming to my page and trying to get a better understanding of who I am as it relates to music, I curate something that allows me to control the narrative and helps them get to understand who I am. Even on my YouTube page, I have my interviews, so on and so forth. So the point that I'm trying to make is that the work that we do isn't just on the application, it's also all the orbits that surround that application as it relates to us. So whether it's our shows, whether it's us just showing up and being part of the community that we're part of, or provide kind of handling all the media that we have to make sure that make sure people want to actually get behind us.
Yeah, right. I mean,
is that making sense?
I think so. Just before when we were waiting for you, I was talking to people in chats or whatever, and I mean, if there's one thing that I've been, it's consistent with this weekly episodes and weekly interviews, and you know, I feel like the track record is there at this point.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of like figuring out who cares about that track record enough to endorse it. And
well, I'm surprised. Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm surprised you haven't applied for a Story Hive grant because you do the podcasting. They've had podcast grants that have been available that you would have been able to take advantage of.
Sure. So this is something I had written down, is that I always feel like does how much a guy needs it come into it, because I'm doing the thing already.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So for me to now come back and be like, yo, and I need this amount of dollars per episode, and then I'm going to pay this guy this amount of dollars, even though he'd do it for free anyways, as I've proven 95 times in a row now. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
no, I get what you're saying.
I could just do the damn thing without having to ask for all the money. So like, does it seem a little bit, I don't know, a little bit unnecessary for a grant committee who's looking at it and being like, well, he's not going to change anything. He's not saying he's going to go do live interviews. He just wants to keep doing the interviews like he does from his living room on Zoom. Like, it's all already paid for or whatever. I would like to make some money out of the thing, but, and right now there's no incoming money, but I managed to tread water or whatever. So it's like, one thing at the mock jury seminar there was that they said that, like, they don't want you to come away with anything but the art afterwards. That you shouldn't be like that. They're not trying to help people buy their new camera, even though I could probably count up to both hands guys I know who have bought cameras with grant money over the years, right? Like, but according to the seminar, they said, like, no, when you're done with the grant, like, we don't want you to have paid your rent with it. We don't want you to have bought yourself new gear with it. Like, we want you to walk away with only the art that you've produced, and that's what you have afterwards. And I was like, then what's the fucking point? I'm already doing the damn thing. Like,
okay, so there's a lot that you said there. So let's look at the first thing, which is, like, if you're already doing the thing, then and you don't feel you need it, then don't apply for it. But if you feel like you can actually up the production, possibly get more cameras, more lighting, and pay people to do so, then definitely. But if you don't feel you need it, then don't use it, right?
So the one thing that I think could benefit for the podcast is advertising dollars. I don't have advertising dollars, so it's tough to get more eyes and ears on this project. I can continue doing this project forever right now, but it would be nice to have a little bit more money so that I could help the thing grow by, paying for some ads here and there or whatever. Is that something I could look at for a grant for the podcast to help this podcast out?
I don't see why you wouldn't be able to. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to, as long as you could justify why you need it. And I think that if you're able to promote the fact that, or communicate the fact that you actually would be promoting the culture of Canadian hip hop through allowing this to reach other people, and also look at the void that you'd be filling, because in Canada, we don't have a lot of podcasts that actually focus on Canadian hip hop. We have a lot of podcasts that focus on Toronto hip hop and only interview people from Toronto, but you're literally interviewing multiple people from across Canada and documenting history in every single podcast that you do. So there's a justification there. It's a matter of, how do you put into the words that need to be there for someone to say, like, yeah, like, this is part of Canadian heritage. We should document this. We should promote this. More people should be learning about this. So there's that angle that you could take.
I had to turn down my first American I don't know, a month or two ago, a guy from Florida, and I've played his music on AdSync. He works with a lot of Canadians, but he messaged me saying, I've got a new album coming up. And I was like, all right, cool, let's do Fly in Formation then. And we were like halfway through scheduling when we were going to do it. And I was like, wait, are you Canadian though? And he's like, no, I'm in Florida. And I was like, okay, sorry, man.
Can't do it.
It gotta be cut. But yeah, so I'm definitely trying to push this Canadian hip hop thing, because there's so much good Canadian hip hop, but a lot of people, could name 5 or 10 artists, but don't really appreciate just how much good talent there is out there. So I'd love to be able to get it to a wider audience and show more people what I'm doing. Last week's AdSync has, I think, 25 plays or something, but it'd be sweet to throw a couple zeros behind that, get people actually listening. So that's one thing that I've thought about, like, I could apply for a grant for. And
you had mentioned something else as well too. I'm trying to remember what you had just mentioned in addition to the podcast. You miss it. Sorry, yeah. But go ahead.
Dude, I don't know. We get ranting. I can't remember what was said prior. Sorry, dude. But
I'll leave a comment underneath when you posted it in regards to what you just said, because there was something that I wanted to share in regards to one of your comments. But yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
I think I was talking about, like, how I don't really need money to keep it going right now, as much as just, like, I'd like to be able to pay myself to do what I'm already doing. Like,
yes. Okay, so perfect. You had mentioned the fact that they had said that you should leave with nothing at all, right?
Right.
So here, that's a bit misleading in the sense that if you need time to focus on creating, then you can apply for what is called subsistence, right? So subsistence allows you to pay your basic living expenses, so rent, car payment, groceries, childcare, whatever the case may be, right? And typically, most organizations will cap that at a certain amount per month or per week, and so that could help you take time off work to focus on writing a book, producing a podcast, recording an album, whatever the case may be, right? Sure. You had also mentioned not being able to utilize the money for equipment or to pay yourself. Some grants do allow you to pay yourself, right? And some of them will give you the option of, we can either allow you to pay yourself through subsistence, or we can allow you to pay yourself this rate here, but you have to be able to justify why you need that, right? Okay. As it relates to equipment, there are typically, most grants don't allow you to buy equipment or anything like that, but there are a few that are out there where you can actually utilize the funds to cover a certain portion of equipment. The biggest thing is that they don't want this to become like the big hustle where it's just like, okay, I'm going to get this grant and I'm going to have all this equipment, so on and so forth. They want to see that you have some skin in the game. And here's the thing: if you are paying yourself for, and I guess it doesn't really help you out in the end, because the little bit that you would be paying yourself, for you to then, it would make more sense for you to take that and reinvest it into what you do, right? But for you to like take that, and because you're paying yourself, right? If you're going to take that and go buy a bunch of Air Jordans, then are you really an artist?
Right. So how about for the mix show portion, for After the Smoke is Clear? Like, I spend, $20 or $30 on music a week. Are there grants for people's college radio shows? I sat down with my dad a couple of months ago and told him, like, according to how much artists are paid for spins on college radio, I've injected X amount of dollars into the Canadian music industry last year. And he goes, well, how much did you make doing it? Yeah. Thanks, Dad. All right. But that's the reality of it, is that, like, I'm leaking money doing this. I'm bleeding money to do this. And just any way to stop that and even just break even on the goddamn thing, I would be happy with. But it's like, where do you find a grant where it's not really a podcast? You can't call a show where you're playing other people's music a podcast, right? So for the interview, Flying Formation, I could do a podcast grant maybe. But as far as a weekly radio show, have you ever heard of any support for that? Like,
no, I haven't. But here's the thing, though. A radio show like yours is important. Like, we obviously have CRTC mandates in regards to how much Canadian content has to be played on the show, but you go above and beyond in playing Canadian content, right?
So 100%.
I think that 100%. Okay, so I think that in a situation like that, conversations with provincial music industry associations like Alberta Music or Sask Music or Manitoba Music, so on and so forth, or just having conversations amongst other DJs in the sense of like, hey, like, we're spending this, we're spending that, or whatever. Is there something that can be created that can help sustain what we're doing? Because at the end of the day, like, you are finding ways to keep the culture alive. And I think that that's the part that you have to really like look into, in the sense of like, is there a way we can figure something out that allows us to keep the culture alive? Because if you take away campus radio in Canada, there's no like radio outlets outside of CBC that are playing Canadian content at the extent that you guys are. So you guys are critical to the development. For a lot of artists, like, we list campus radio in our stations that we're getting radio play at, right? Because we're not getting play from mainstream radio. And granted, people have moved away from radio, and now it's more Spotify, streaming.
This was what I was just going to say. So even me, my focus is to push people to Mixcloud more so than tell people I have a radio show, right? Because if you're in Lethbridge, you can listen Mondays and Thursdays, but it doesn't even make it to Calgary or whatever. So, like, really, I'm trying to push people to, you can listen for free every week. There's a new episode Thursday, mixcloud.com/Doobyis, So again, that's a thing that makes me feel like, okay, so even if there was some sort of like radio grant, like, does anybody want to cater to a market this small in Lethbridge by like, oh yeah, he should have the radio grant. Like, I don't know. It feels like somebody in Edmonton's going to get that above me, but maybe I'm
You
wrong.
never know. You never know. And there is no grant, or at least not that I'm aware of, for radio. But at the same time, though, like I said, like, have those conversations. I think that this is where, as a community, we don't really we don't spend enough time talking about our challenges and our struggles with other people who are in the same sector as us, so then we can actually collectively come up with solutions, right? And even working with, again, music industry associations, like working with them and other organizations, be like, hey, like, here's a challenge that we are having. We want to make sure that we can preserve this. Because even I mentioned the fact of airplay. It's not just airplay. You guys are an outlet for artists to actually document their history and share it with people to develop their fan base. And we're not seeing that on Spotify. Yes, we're seeing it more on YouTube, but at the same time, though, like, how many like podcasts are on YouTube that cater towards Canadian hip hop? There's not a lot, right? Or even just Canadian music, period, for independent artists. There's not that. But if you're able to have conversations with people who are in the same field as you, working at campus radio, and be like, hey, like, what are you guys doing over there that's helping your artists out? What are you doing over there that's helping your artists out? What are the challenges you're having? How are you dealing with these challenges? And then figure out a way to bring that to a music industry association. Be like, hey, like, you guys represent music in this province. We are an arm of that. We are an extension of that. Is there any relationships that you have in the government or private sector that you can leverage to help us get funding so that we can actually support these artists more than we are currently doing right now, right? Do you get where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm not saying it's not a simple fix, but at the same time, though, like, here's the thing. Hey the Chosen runs an event called Ship Hop every quarter in Calgary. Yeah. I had the opportunity to perform there in October, and this thing blew my mind. And I'm just like, wow, like, that's really dope. And I'm looking at what they're doing there, but I'm just like, yo, we used to have hip hop in the park. We used to have hip hop for hunger. In Calgary, they used to have 10 at 10. And what
I think they did hip hop for hunger this year. There was a hip hop for hunger this year. It's still around.
Okay, well, not the music from outer space, but okay. it's still happening. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that we have different entities who are doing different things that support and promote hip hop, right?
Yeah.
So if we are communicating with different events, like Winnipeg, they used to have a Northern Touch Hip Hop Festival, like, we should all be communicating with each other on a consistent, even if it's a monthly basis, to be like, hey, how was your month? How was the latest month? What are some challenges you had? So on and so forth, and sharing amongst each other. Because what we're going to find is that if we're able to take the best practices of each one of these entities that are existing to allow hip hop to be promoted, then we'll find that, hey, like, this person here has already dealt with this. We don't have to go and do this again. Let's just adapt the practices that they have and apply them to our scene, see if it works. It might or might not work, but having that communication to understand what's working for them and what's not working for them and what we could be doing in our scene will help raise things up, right? And those conversations become crucial, because a lot of times we're operating in silos, and we're doing something that, and we're struggling with something, I should say, that somebody else has figured out 2-3 years ago.
Right.
And they could give us the blueprint of like, yo, like, you don't got to do this, like, do this. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But we have to
that right there is exactly why I started doing these Fly in Formation interviews. I mean, also to help everybody promote their music and stuff, but just to try to network, to try to get some of these answers from people, and see what other people are doing as far as how they're getting their music out to the people or whatever. So yeah, man, I think it is important to have those conversations for sure. One thing, when I was talking to Def 3, I don't know, a few weeks ago now, he mentioned, we were talking about grants, and he mentioned, don't pay people to write your grants for you, was what he was saying. He told me basically, like, you got to give them all the information to write down for you anyways. You might as well just write it down yourself. Where do you stand on that? Is it worth paying for a grant writer?
Yes and no. I've been a grant writer before. I know there's a lot of work, a lot of headache, because a lot of artists aren't as prepared as they should be, right? The more prepared you are as an artist, the more you're going to get out of that experience, right? And so A lot of times I'll host workshops in regards to like what things artists should actually have when it comes to writing a grant. So then that way, if they, because the thing about it is that you don't want to hire a grant. I think everyone should understand how to write a grant, but then hire someone to write the grant for them if they don't have the time, right? As opposed to, let's say you're busy doing all the stuff you have and you don't have the time, and it's just like, okay, cool, I'll hire this grant writer, I'll prepare all the stuff for them, give it to them, they can take care of all the stuff. And because your grant is not just having like answering a few questions, you are looking at putting together a proposal, you're looking together like a project description, your budget, your marketing plan, your team bios. So all this stuff becomes part of your grant, and some people don't know how to put that together. Someone like Dev3, who's been in this game for a number of years, he's learned. And I think that a lot of people should learn that skill set, because it will become extremely handy as they develop as an artist. But to say that you shouldn't hire one, I don't think that's a fair statement. I think that if you need to hire one because you don't have the time or the skill set, cool. But I strongly recommend learning how to do it yourself, right? They are time consuming. And in some instances, there are some people that take your money and have no idea how to write a grant, but they're telling you they're a grant writer. Like, I think you have to ask questions in regards to like, what is their success rate? Who have they written grants for? Can you get a list of their clients so you could actually ask those people like, yo, like, what was your experience like? If the person says, I would never hire that person again, then run, you know? But if the person says, yeah, no, it was a great experience, and because here's the thing. My background, one of the things I've done in the past is that I've been a journalist. I've also gone to school for marketing. So public relations is something that I understand, right? I've also worked at radio. I've worked at a record store. I've worked with labels, so on and so forth. So I understand the role of a publicist, right? I've been a publicist and I've gotten a lot of press for projects, whether it be Politic Lab projects, Arlo Maverick projects, even art projects for other artists, right? However, in 2021, I began working with a woman by the name of Juliana Capone, who runs a company called Light of Day Publicity. And because of the fact that I've already done the role of being a publicist, my relationship with her is so smooth and so fluid, right? I understand what she needs because I've done what she's done before, right? So me hiring her is to allow me to be able to focus on something else, but also she's great at what she does. Like, I don't have to think about anything because she's going to do it. And she also has relationships that I don't have established already, right? And so it's not to say that I can't do it. Yes, I can do it, but that means that the time that I'm dedicating to that won't be dedicated to something else. Where it's like, she's competent, she's great at what she does, and like, she cares about the projects, which is so important, because
just judging from her name, it sounds like she's well connected. You know, Capone, she's got to have some connects. Yeah.
Shouts out Juliana. Now, the great thing with her is that, like, yeah, I was saying, like, she's good at what she does and she cares about the project. She only takes on like 7 projects a year, and you want someone who's going to treat your project, whether it's your grant, whether it's your marketing campaign, your social media campaign, or your publicity campaign, like as if it was theirs. And that's one thing that she does with me, does with Riz and other people that she works with.
Okay. So another thing that I've kind of wondered about grant applications my entire life is like, am I better off using my government name to try to write this grant under? Will they look at a guy named Doobyis and just be like, this guy's some sort of degenerate pothead, and we're not here to endorse that type of thing? Or, you know, along with that, like, you know, every grant application I've ever seen asks me, like, what's your race? What's your sex? What's your sexual orientation? Do you have any disabilities? And I'm like, I'm a cishet white guy. Like, wah, wah,
okay, so,
you know.
So just for context, you should put your sorry. I'm getting over a cold and my voice is not fully back yet. You should put your
COVID, I feel like we're all getting over colds, man. Yeah. Constantly.
You should put your artist name in addition to your real name. Depending on the application, some of them will say what your artist name is, right? Now, as it relates to the demographic information, one of the reasons why they do that is because there has been disparities as far as like grant funding as it relates to marginalized communities, right? So that information allows them to see. A lot of times the person who's actually adjudicating it is not going to see that information. That is information that the grant body has, so that when they look at it in the sense of like, are we making sure that we're actually connecting with different communities? And if there's an issue, because here's the thing, you can't guarantee outcomes, but you can essentially look at the data and see, okay, well, we've noticed that we're not getting a lot of grants out to these communities. Why are these communities not succeeding in their grants? Then you can do outreach and be like, okay, maybe it's a situation of we need to actually communicate to them on when deadlines are, or maybe a situation of we communicate to them on how grants actually work. That's where the whole idea of doing the mock jury came from. The mock jury was an idea I had from years back and said, hey, I'd love for people from the Black community to better understand the whole grant writing process and see it in real time. So Jinting and I collaborated to create that, and the target audience for that was Black communities, because when it came to the AFA, Edmonton Arts Council, or even Canada Council, there was a lack of applications coming in, and some of the applications that were coming in were not very strong. So how do we fix it, right? So that's why that information is being asked. It's not in a matter of, well, do we give this do we not give it to him because he's a white cis male, or do we give it to this person over here who has a grant that's not as strong, but they're a minority, right?
Right.
That's not the intention of it, you know?
Okay. Sure. All right. Another thing I wanted to ask about is like, we're kind of past, and we had a bit of a conversation about this, how, you know, I want to say 15 years ago, I was dabbling in blogging and was writing up different reviews for different albums and just talking about music on my shitty little Tumblr blog or whatever. And I ended up seeing like you guys used a quote from my blog talking about a Politic Live album or whatever. And I can't remember the quote. I can't even remember the name of the album at this point, but
Ellipsis.
Yeah, Ellipsis. There you go. So where can people look in this day and age for stuff like that? Like, where do you get because you know the newspapers aren't covering the local music anymore, you know, so you got to go to the blogs basically to try to find these quotes to put in your grants application so that you have somebody backing you up, right? Like, I guess other than the letters of recommendations.
And the thing was is that like so much has changed, and that blog era was an era that I fondly reminisce on and fondly miss, because of the fact that there were music journalists or bloggers who cared about music, and so they listened to albums, they wrote about them, and if you're an artist, you could then take that information and then be like, okay, cool, I'm going to use this pull quote and put it in there. It still can be done, and even with my most recent album, Blue Collar, Juliana Capone was able to get me a ton of press, and we were able to use so many quotes from that. But when I compare that to Maybe Tomorrow or Adaptation, night and day. And it's not because Juliana wasn't good at what she does. It's just because there's less blogs covering stuff. Like some of the bigger blogs in the 2000s, like those aren't around anymore, you know? And so it just kind of is what it is.
Yeah. So I guess for a project like this, that would be, you know, thinking about this theoretical ATSIC kind of Canada-wide project or whatever with a bunch of different artists on it, it wouldn't be about my particular artistic output. You know, it's not like I'm looking for people to say how dope I was on this album or whatever to put on that application. I don't even like know who I would like the program manager at or program director at CKXU or whatever, I guess maybe, or like point to my CCRA College Campus Canada Radio Association award that I got for one of the seasons of ATSIC. Like, I don't know, man. Where do you dig up for? I'm sure people like the show, but like, fucked if I know how to find them to get a quote from them. You know, they're not writing about it in the newspaper.
But you wouldn't necessarily need that, right? Having those quotes are great, but they're not a make or break situation, right? Your bio itself is going to be able to define whether or not you should actually be ready for this, right? A lot of times it's a matter of where are you in your career, right? There are artists who are just at the beginning and artists who are a little bit more further along in their journey, right? But if you're able to provide enough evidence that you've done something like this before, whether it's creating an album, whether it's producing, whether it's curating something, those work in your favor in a sense of allowing the jury to see that you can complete the task that you're actually trying to get funding for, right? One of the things that I typically do in my grant applications that I show my artist trajectory, right? So I show, so if I'm dealing with Arlo Maverick, I'll look at maybe tomorrow. What were the successes of maybe tomorrow? Then I look at what were the successes of Soul Merchant. Then I look at the successes of Blue Collar, and I'll provide that to the jury for them to see, like, okay, like with each album this guy releases, he's acquiring more, he's doing more, he's challenging himself artistically and professionally. And so when they see something like that, it's like, okay, this person here is like, he has the experience, he's building and leveling up each time he releases a project. So that's something that you could do. You have and a lot of times this is where, going back to what I said in regards to grants, in regards to paying someone, is that most artists do not catalog or document what they've done, right? So when a grant writer sits down and says, hey, all right, okay, so I've got to build a bio for you, I've got to build like a history to show what you've done and show your trajectory, most artists just like, they're like, I think I've done a show here. And then like they've never once wrote down the shows they've done. I can catalog, I can show you the shows I was doing when I was 15 years old, bro. That's how far back I go, right? I can show you the shows that I've done, show you press going all the way back then because I catalog everything, right? That's just who I am as a person, right? But that needs to become the standard for artists because that's not only just how you get grant funding, that's how you create, you can give that to your fans as far as them like getting to better understand your journey, plus festivals and other things. Like when people see there's a track record behind it, it's the equivalent of if you want to be a doctor and you only have 1 year of experience, no one's going to let you operate on that. But if you have 10, 15 years of experience, people trust that. And as an artist, some of us come out the gate and we are amazing artists from the beginning. And it's just like, yo, this kid's fly, he's dope, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, though, what have you done, right? And I don't mean that in an insulting way. I mean that in the sense of document what you've done. If you've done 15 shows, show those shows. If you've done showcases, show those showcases. If you've done festivals, show those festivals. If you got awards or nominations, list that stuff off. If you don't have that, then lean on the things that you can do, right? And at the end of the day, though, you should be looking at it from the standpoint of how do I build my body of work? Because my body of work is going to speak for me when people are concerned about, like, can they pull this off? Well, the body of work says it can. And that's where people will be in the jury fighting for you, saying that, no, like, look at all the stuff this person's done. Like, this person here is more than capable of accomplishing what they're trying to accomplish, you know?
Weird. So, like, do stream numbers and, kind of the metrics, the how many followers you've got and all these things come into play almost more so? Because at that seminar with Jinting and the U of L professor, they actually had a chuckle about how they never listened to the music. They didn't even listen to the music.
I listen to the music.
and I just thought to myself, like, it hurt my soul a little bit, if I'm being honest, that I was like, is it too pie in the sky to imagine a world where, like, the people who decide which artist gets money can have listened to enough music to know what's dope and what isn't, and like can factor that in beyond just like who can write the best grant application? Because, like, I don't know, I haven't played Sled Island, like I'm
playing Sled Island for the first time this year, bro.
There you go, man. Yeah. Okay. I mean, and that'll help you get another grant, I'm sure, when they see it written on the application. Like, hopefully, man. I'm cheering for it. Yeah.
So here's the thing: metrics are more important to Factor because Factor focuses more on the business. But if you're applying for Canada Council, they don't care about the metrics. If you're applying for Alberta Foundation for the Arts, they don't care about the metrics. If you're applying for EAC, they don't care about the metrics. Factor is more of a business grant than an artistic grant, right? Okay. And so as it relates to the music, like, the jurors should be paying attention to the music because at the end of the day, like, that is the most important thing, right? And you can't determine what people are going to do in the jury session. One of the things that I do is that I'll listen to the music and the plan need to line up, right? If the music is strong, but the plan isn't, then I'm just like, I can't give you as many points, right? But if this plan is strong and the music isn't good, then again, I can't give you as many points. But if I see potential in what is there, because again, there's what's on the page, but if you provide links, then I'm going to go down that rabbit hole and search to see, like, okay, like I want to make sure that I am 100% certain with the decision I'm going to make. Whether it's a yay or a nay, I have to be 100% certain. And so that's where I'll go down that rabbit hole. And that's what I was saying earlier. If people allow me to find the stuff that I need to find, as opposed to me having to go and dig it up, because if I go digging, I might find something you don't want me to find, right? But if you lead me down the path that you want me to go down, because that's the path that's going to provide me with all the information that's going to sell me on you, great. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, man. Actually, it's funny you say you might find something that the artist doesn't want you to find. I actually wanted to ask too about, like, do they do a social media check? Like, is somebody going to look at my threads and be like, oh, this guy hates on Danielle Smith all the time, like, get him out of here? You know
No,
what I mean?
no,
Or whatever.
it's
Okay.
not, it's nothing like that. The thing was is that at the end of the day, like, yeah, they're not going. They're concerned about the music, right? And
Yeah.
I can't speak for every juror, but at the same time, though, like, I've never let someone's political views affect my ability to, And most artists don't put their political views on there, but you being one who does, that shouldn't affect what you do. The biggest thing is that convince me as a juror that I should be supporting this project. And again, if you don't have the social media numbers, you don't have the metrics, then lean into the things that you do have, right? Provide a killer demo, right? And that demo shouldn't be a demo in the sense of, hey, like, this doesn't sound polished. Get it as close as it can to being radio ready or streaming ready as possible. So then that way I'm being sold on it, because you have to keep in mind that your application is being assessed with a bunch of other applications, and the one that has put the most effort into it and is good is going to be the one that's gonna be the one that people are going to be want to support, And
Yeah.
just for context, FACTA juries are different than juries with AFA or EAC. I'm not sure how Canada Council does, but I know that EAC and AFA have a jury of people who listen to the music. They spend time with the music and the applications, like typically like let's say 2 or 3 months, where they'll go through everything. They then come together and they've already made their notes and so on and so forth. And they go through all the applications and say, give their opinions, feedback, and this is where people could be swayed based off of the information that has been presented to them. They then create their list of, okay, these are the people we want to support, right? Factor, entirely different. If you are a factor juror, which anybody who's watching can be, you just have to sign up. As you listen to the stuff, you're listening to it on your own. You make your decision, and it's all done online. You submit it, and then you go from there. Where before, FACT used to have people actually coming together in a room to decide on. And the great thing about having people in a room is that if I don't know enough about an artist, somebody else who's more familiar with that artist or familiar with that genre can explain things to me that I wasn't aware of, right? And so that human element goes so far where, and this is not me knocking Factor, they funded projects I've done in the past, but I do miss the days where Factor used to actually bring people together and have them assess applications in real time. Jinting and I, we used to do that, right? Now it's a matter of, okay, you apply online, you're by yourself in your kitchen, wherever you may be, listening to this music. And sometimes you want someone to lean on and be like, hey, like, what do you think of this? But you don't have that. But you do have that with the EAC and the AFA.
Yeah. Fair enough, man. So I know you're about to head out to Vancouver for the Junos here. That's coming up this
Yes.
weekend, isn't it? Or what night do the Junos
Yes.
actually happen?
So the gala happens on the Saturday, and then the Sunday is when the broadcast happens. So for those who aren't aware, the non-televised awards take place the night before at like a gala where people dress up and get dinner, so on and so forth. It's quite expensive. And then the broadcast that everyone sees on TV, that is less awards being given out and also a lot more performances.
Okay. So I did want to, talk to you a little bit about just the Junos and the lesser award shows too that happen across the country and in every different city. I feel like they have their own kind of little music awards or whatever.
Yeah.
there's been a lot of backlash against the like East Coast Music Awards Association out there in Halifax and stuff, and some artists have like retracted their submissions from that, saying that like basically, from what I can gather, talking to those guys, and I'm paraphrasing this. This is my thoughts on it, not necessarily theirs, but that they're kind of out of touch with the hip hop scene, and that they've given some people who don't deserve those awards, and that they don't listen to enough hip hop to know who deserves the hip hop awards or whatever.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's pretty widespread, right? Like the awards across the country are, it seems to me, more reliant on who can write a better application, similar to a grant application, for like, hey, this is my album and this is why you should give it the award, than it is on like who actually made a dope album necessarily, because there's a lot of albums that I haven't seen nominated for any awards that were great last year, and then
but
there's some that I had never heard of that when I went and checked them out, they're good.
weren't as good. Yeah, but not as good.
Well, I'm not saying that they're not as good even. Like, I like them. I listened to the Juno nominees this year, and like, but I was just kind of like, it takes a lot for me to not have found you. Like, where was this music? Why did I not hear about this when it actually dropped or whatever? I spend hours and hours every week looking for people's music. It's weird that the first time I hear about it is when it's nominated for a Juno Award. And so, I've seen in comment section, somebody said it comes down to 50% streaming numbers, and then
yes.
The rest is up to the jury or whatever. So does that check out? Is that actually the truth? It comes down to streaming numbers for a big portion?
Yes. Okay. So let's deal with 3 different awards. Okay. The East Coast Music Awards, I was involved with them once, and that was to help Shiest apply for or submit for They Call Me Shiest, right? He ended up getting the nomination. That was years ago. I don't recall what that process is like. I'm not sure what the adjudication process is like, right?
Sure.
Let's now swing over to the Western Canadian Music Awards, which is hosted by Breakout West. I've been nominated for 3 of my projects, Maybe Tomorrow, Blue Collar, and Soul Merchant. That award is not for a recording, which a lot of people are misled because of the fact that it's most people think that the award, because you're submitting an album or submitting a select group of songs, that is for that specific project, but it's not. It's a little misleading. And not on their part, because they make it clear: rap/hip hop artist of the year, roots artist of the year, whatever the case may be, right? With that, they're looking at, so the WCMAs looks at a 2-year time period and says, we want you to submit an album that was released within this 2-year time period, in addition to support materials that shows us why you were the artist of that genre per that year, that time period, right? So you get a 2-year time frame, right? And so with that, the assessment is done through judges who will listen to the music in specific categories, and basically based off of the music itself and the support materials, they will then decide on, okay, this is our top 10 or whatever, and they submit those, and then based off of the ranking system, that will then come up with 5 nominees, right? From that point there, moving forward, anybody who is a member of a music industry association in Western Canada can vote on it. So at that point in time, it's not judges who are selected to listen to the music in that genre. It's now open to everybody, right? So that's why it's important for people such as yourself, people who are part of the culture, to be reaching out to the WCMAs, because they promote, like, hey, if you want to be a juror, sign up to be a juror, right? You do have to listen to all the music. You do have to take the time to go through all the support materials, but it is more than possible for people from our community to be involved with that. I don't know what the ECMAs is like, right? And because of the fact that we have that option, we need to be in communication. Again, I spoke about it earlier. The conversations we need to be having with a lot of these organizations, we're not having them. We're looking at it from the standpoint of, you're over there, we're over here, as opposed to be like, hey, you guys have an award show that has a category for hip hop. We would like to be involved with this, right? Years ago, Adaptation was up against an album by Red One, an album by Johanna Sillenpaw, and an album by Scavenger, and another group that I can't remember, right? It was called the Outstanding Urban Recording.
Okay.
Politic Live is hip hop. Red One is hip hop. Johanna Sillenpaw is jazz. And Scavenger is ska. And I can't remember, my apologies to the other act that was nominated for this, right? So you have all these artists who are competing for this one award, and all the genres, they're just all mixed up, right? Scavenger won that night. And when Scavenger won, they're like, hey, bro, like, we shouldn't have won this award. It should have went to you guys, right? Like, yo, you guys won this. It's fair and square, right? However, we realized and recognized that there was a need for there to be a separate category for hip hop. But at the time, the Western Canadian Music Awards wasn't getting enough hip hop submissions. So myself and Will Strickland spoke with them and said, what do we need to do to create a separate hip hop category, a separate R&B category, separate reggae category? And they had said, if we can get a certain number of submissions in for each category per year, we will create a separate category for that. So I went on a promotional campaign to the point that I got myself in a lot of trouble with a lot of people who were just like, you're promoting the WCMAs who awards. And it's just like, yo, like, we're trying to build something, guys, right? So we ended up getting a category for hip hop. Then eventually we ended up getting a category for R&B. Reggae still doesn't have a category, which I'm hoping they'll get one. But even just this year, Afrobeats was a category was created for that, right?
Nice.
And I say that to say that the more communication we have with these organizations, the more we end up getting what we need for our community to make sure our genres are represented. So it's a conversation piece, right? Now let's deal with the Junos, okay? The Junos is currently 50% based off of judges who are as the rap. So I'm the chair of the Rap Advisory Committee, right? So I basically head the committee that communicates with CARIS, which is the body that governs the Junos. And so we communicate with them the needs of the hip hop community as it relates to that category, right?
Wait, did you say the body that governs the Junos is called KRS?
No, CARIS, not KRS.
Okay, that's a weird coincidence. All right.
That would be dope still. So our role is basically to do outreach, to communicate to people what the adjudication process, what's needed for the adjudication process. We also host information sessions. We also submit possible judges. We don't know who the judges are. We just submit a list to CARIS, who then they decide, okay, who the judges are going to be, right? So in that sense, again, 50% is based off of the judges' votes, and 50% is based off of consumption, right? Now, here's where things become tricky, because CARIS is in a position where they have to be able to justify and stand behind any of the nominations and awards, right? So this is where things get tricky, because if you have an artist from, let's say, Lethbridge, Alberta, who makes a dope hip hop album, but they do not promote it, no one knows about it, and let's say it's all judges, okay? No consumption whatsoever, right?
Right.
Those judges are just like, yo, this album is dope. And it's all hip hop heads, right? Because CARIS doesn't know a hip hop head from a non hip hop head, right? And all of a sudden, some random dude from Lethbridge named Doobyis ends up getting a nomination. Everyone's just like, who the hell is Doobyis? Now, what you keep in mind, Junos it's different than the Polaris, where the Polaris looks at, like, you get journalists and people who are involved in the music industry to listen to the music. They vote on it in that sense, right? This is a little bit different in the sense that you are essentially getting industry people to kind of vote on stuff, right? So I think that that's where things become different, because...
So the Junos is more an award for success in the industry.
Yes. Because a lot of times, you're like, with all due respect, you're rewarding a team as opposed to an actual artist, right? Because whoever had the best team, who was able to market and promote that album, is essentially who you're giving the award to, right? And that's no disrespect. It just is what it is. Where something like the Polaris is more, okay, like, we've listened to this album. We think that it has an impact culturally, socially. So we think that this project should be on the short list, long list, possibly win, you know? So that's where things kind of get convoluted as it relates to the Junos, because the Junos is very much about I don't want to say it's not about the artistic merit, because we've seen artists like Shad win a Juno over Drake because of the fact that the jury was just like, this is a dope album. Like, we should support this, you know? But there is that whole success factor in the sense of rewarding artists who are doing well successfully because they have great teams behind them that have come up with these great campaigns to market their stuff, you know?
Right. So I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about this publicly, and you know, I don't want to get anybody in trouble. Stop me if if I'm not.
Okay.
But I got an email from the Junos, like from someone at, you know, Juno.com or whatever it was. Like, it looked like an official email to me saying like, "Hey, your name was put forward. You know, as someone who would be a good judge for
Sure. Yeah.
the rap awards, right?" And it was you and Cosm put that up. So you know, I appreciate the hell out of you guys doing that. That's dope,
Man, no
having my
worries,
name
man.
said by peers in rooms that I'm not in. So
Okay.
I,
You
you
didn't
know,
become a judge, did you?
no, I didn't become a judge.
Okay.
I got that email from them, and then like it said, you know, we want you to be a judge.
Yeah.
Go fill out the application. So, like, here's the link to the application. I filled it out. Never heard anything back. They must have found a group of other people who they decided had better credentials or whatever. I mean, whatever. I'm not too
Yeah.
hurt about it, but did it?
And
Did I
it may
do
not be
something
that.
wrong there? Like, was it?
No,
Was
no.
I? Yeah. Okay.
I think in a situation like that, they're sending that email to then get you in their system. So then that way, possibly next year or 2 years from now, whatever the case may be, you are now in their system for them to be able to look at as a potential judge, you know? So
Okay.
I don't think it's ever a situation of you did something wrong. I think it's more so they have to have enough judges within their system so that they could A, look for conflicts of interest, and B, ensure that they're not having the same jury pool every single year, right? Because if you have the same jury pool every single year, then that's when things become a little, the biases are able to come into the picture, you know. But if you have a different group of people who are qualified to be assessors every single year or adjudicators every single year, then now you have a better chance of having great art come to the forefront, you know.
Real. So this is the second year in a row, I want to say, that the Junos are happening in Western Canada. Or was it Halifax last year? Was it Edmonton last year? Or was that 2 years
no
ago?
Halifax last year. In 2023, it was in Edmonton.
Yeah, right. Okay. So I guess it did go back to Halifax between, but I was going to ask about just kind of Western representation in not only the Junos, but just in the Canadian music industry at all. Do you feel like the Western part of Canada, uh, as far as the music industry goes, is represented properly and
No.
appropriately? Okay.
No, I will boldly say it. And that's part of the reason why I've stepped into so many different roles to help change that. You know, I do think that we see the issues, we see the fact there's a lack of representation, a lack of our voices being heard, a lack of our artists being seen. And some of us will sit back and be like, oh man, blah, blah, blah. Some of us will be like, okay, cool. Like, we want to be a part of these conversations. We want to be in these rooms, you know, people such as Kyle Kraft, people such as myself, Benny J, so on and so forth, even cast from Winnipeg as well too. Like, we are
Kyle Kraft's the dude from the Rap Career Growth Facebook page, right? Yeah. Him and Imperative, I think, run that. Shouts to those guys. Yeah.
100%. And we're trying to be part of those conversations, because at the end of the day, like, it only changes if we make something happen. Because I was born in Toronto, but I'm very critical of how Toronto has completely made Canadian hip hop center around them, you know. And there's really dope MCs out there. They have the population, but I think that it's a huge misstep for them not to try to build relationships with people in other markets, because you can't sustain Canadian hip hop off of one city. And I think that's part of the reason why we've struggled to create a national scene, because of the fact that all of our resources and attention gets diverted to one city, where you have a whole country that has multiple cities where hip hop is thriving or existing, and it's not being supported. And some of these artists from Toronto aren't even coming into some of these territories in Western Canada or even Eastern Canada. So so to answer your question, I do think that there needs to be more input from us. And some of them just think that we don't know hip hop. Some of them think that we don't understand the culture, but we live it every single day, you know?
even in Toronto, man, there's so many artists out there who never get really named in the, like, you know, artists to watch up next in Canada or whatever. But
100%.
there's an entire underground scene out there that is dope and getting slept on, even in just Toronto. You know,
Yeah, even in Toronto as well too. Yeah.
So I think, yeah, it's like you said, man. We got to have these conversations. We've got to continue being consistent with putting out you know, the work that shows like, yo, there is talent out here,
Oh yeah,
and
and
you know, it
I don't
deserves
want
to be highlighted.
I don't want it to come across as a us versus them thing. I wanted
Of
to
course.
make it clear that we are all part of the same country. So when we talk about Canadian hip hop, we cannot talk about Canadian hip hop history and just talk about Toronto, Rascals, then Toronto. You know, like we have to talk about the Maximum Definitive. We have to talk about Mood Ralph. We have to talk about Freak Show. We have to talk about Epic. We have to talk about Shice. We have to talk about like everything going on across this country. You know, like there's been people who have created great scenes that have been overlooked because of the fact that when documentation gets created and put out there, the narrative continues to remain that Toronto was going strong, and then all of a sudden the Rascals came in and did Northern Touch, and then it went back to Toronto, and it's just like, nah, man, like there's so much more history, you know?
I did the stats on the music that I played last year on AtSick, and dude, I played over 500 different Canadian artists from across the country, and Toronto did take the prize. You know, they were the most played city, but
they have the largest population.
Yeah, I mean, Vancouver, Edmonton, Halifax were all very close behind, honestly. But yeah, you know, the population in Toronto definitely counts for something. And yeah, there's a lot of dope artists out there, but a lot of dope artists everywhere, really. Yeah, man, it's getting late though. I didn't mean to keep you this long. I appreciate you spending this much time dropping gems here, man.
Ready to rehearse here, so thank you though for your time, man.
Oh, you're waiting to rehearse? Oh, damn. Sorry.
It's all good.
My bad, man. I appreciate you staying long to talk, man. This has been fun.
No worries. I appreciate you having me, man.
Super informative as well. Yeah. All right, man. Peace. I'll catch you next time.
Peace.
All right. So I had a lot of fun talking to Arlo. I hope everybody else did. Here, if I press this button, we got my brand new, updated, upcoming Fly-In Formation interview schedule. Talking to Half Cut next week on Tuesday. Talking to Danny-O. So that's Calgary is where Half Cut's at. Toronto is where Danny-O's at. April 15th, Ezza from Choom Gang is a Niagara Falls-based MC with a new project coming up that I'm sure will be very dope. Everything he puts out is nice. April 22nd, I talked to J.O., formerly known as J.O. Mayers. He told me nobody knew how to pronounce Mayers, and I was like, it's pretty straightforward. It's airs with an M in front of it, guys. But anyways, now his name is J.O. for anybody who couldn't pronounce the full thing. He's half of Run and Gun, Mississauga-based MC. And after that, I'm talking to Kripal. That one was just scheduled today, April 27th. That's the odd interview that's not happening on a Tuesday. Talking to Kripal on a Sunday afternoon. He's got a new album coming up that I'm excited to hear. It sounds like, you know, him and been in with NATO, putting in a ton of work lately. So that should be good. And then April 29th, I talked to a Vancouver-based MC named Hardbody Dreams, who's kind of one of the, like, I want to say 5%er gods and earths kind of. He's one of the first MCs I've heard kicking that type of, you know, knowledge from the west coast of Canada. So I'm looking forward to talking to him. Dope MC. And yeah, I mean, keep tapping in. We'll have new episodes of AtSick as well every week. I'll be live on Twitch tomorrow, Twitch TV/Doobyis, putting together a new episode of AtSick. Fridays, I'm always on Twitch, just hanging out, listening to the new music. It's busy, you know. There's always 7 or 8 hours worth of new music for me to get through. And part of the fun of those streams is that, like, I don't love all of it. You know, I like a good chunk of it, and I end up buying the stuff that I do like. But part of the fun is kind of having a chuckle at the stuff I don't like too. it's all love ultimately, but you know, those are fun streams too. So come through on Twitch, say hi and chat. I appreciate everybody who's here today. Shouts to y'all, and I hope I catch you on the next one. Peace.